stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Are we on?
Yes, we're on now.
So my whole discussion was on.
It
No,
was.
no, no, no.
It wasn't on speaker, but it was. They could read lips.
I will call the January 24th meeting of the Milton Planning Commission to order. It's about 7 o'clock according to my watch. And just to introduce into the record our two new Planning Commission members, Gariel Burchett at one end and Mark Fittner at the other end, and to welcome back Fred Edwards as the other newly sworn in, but for the third time, Planning Commission member. Thank you. I have to, unfortunately, even for the benefit of the one person, read a bunch of stuff. So this is a regular meeting of the City of Milton Planning Commission. I'm George Ragsdale. This is a seven-member commission appointed by the City of Milton Mayor and City Council, created for the purpose of holding public hearings and making recommendations on rezoning, use permits, concurrent variance applications, comprehensive land use plan and plan map, and other related plans and amendments to the zoning ordinance. I've already introduced the three newly sworn-in members, Commissioner Paul Morris to my left, Commissioner Chris Doty, and Joe Kramer to my right. Petitions will be heard in the sequence listed on the posted agenda. I want to acquaint you with some of the rules and procedures for conducting this meeting. The applicant and all those in speaking in support of it will be allowed a total of 10 minutes to present their petition. The applicant can choose part of their time for rebuttal. We don't have any rezoning applications tonight, so I'm going to dispense with the discussion about opposition and so on. All speakers need to identify themselves by filling out a speaker card and before speaking, announce their name and address, and leave it with the staff. Leave the card with the staff member of the Community Development Department. Demonstrations of any sort within the chamber are prohibited, so please refrain from any applause, dialogue with the person speaking out, or any outbursts. No outbursts. Please turn off all cell phones, place them on silent. All remarks will be addressed by the Planning Commission. Please show the same respect to any person speaking that you would expect to receive yourself. Any material that you want the Planning Commission to review during the meeting should be submitted to the Community Development Department, and they will hand it on to us unless we ask for it. Finally, we don't have any applicants, so that's basically all we need to talk about. Right now is the public comment portion of the meeting. Is there anyone here who would like to speak on anything that's not on the agenda? Are you here to talk about the zoning amendment?
Yeah. So you can
Okay,
wait.
so
It'll only be
you
a
can
couple
wait.
more minutes.
Unless there's anything else you'd like to talk about, you can. Okay.
While you're here.
Hearing none, we need a motion to close public comment.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Okay, the first item for us on the agenda is the election of officers that we have to do every year. So the floor is open for nominations for chairperson. Why do we say chairperson? We got seven men up here. For chairman.
Sorry. There used to be women on.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a nomination. But first, I'd like to take a moment and thank you for your leadership in the last year. I think it's been exemplary. You have helped us navigate through some, although not a very challenging year on land use, a very challenging year on text amendments, ordinance updates, et cetera. And you have helped to position our city in a much better place than it was a year ago under your leadership, and I think we've all benefited from that as a city as well as a panel. And as such, I would like to nominate you again for the 2012 chairmanship.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
I appreciate that, Paul. Although I don't take any credit for what we accomplished. It was a team effort. Are there any other nominations for chairperson? Chairperson.
I move nominations be closed.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. We've got one nomination for chairperson. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you, everybody. The floor is open. We need nominations for vice chairperson.
I'd like to nominate,
Joe had his hand up.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Fine. Go ahead. Go.
One of you,
I would like to nominate Paul Moore for the vice chairman of Milton City Planning.
any, is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? Any other nominations? Okay, we need a motion to close nominations.
I make a motion to close.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All those in favor of Paul for vice chairman?
Aye.
Any opposed? Unanimous. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Next item is approval of minutes. We have minutes both from the work session that we had on December 16th and the commission meeting we had on the 21st. Let's take the work session first. Were there any corrections or changes to those minutes?
Very general.
You gotta look hard to find
To
something.
both sentences?
Hearing none, I'd like a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved.
Okay. Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
I'm sorry, I was laughing over that. Who made the motion?
Joe made the motion, I made the
Okay.
second.
4 in favor, 5 in favor, 4 in favor.
No, 5 in favor.
No, Chris wasn't here.
Oh, that's right, 4 in favor,
Yeah,
3.
3 abstentions. Okay, next, the minutes from the meeting of December 21st, the Planning Commission of December 21st. Are there any changes or corrections there? I'd like to change one word with everybody's indulgence. I absolutely mean that. If you guys that were here think that I did say this way, we'll leave it, but the very last sentence in section 5 on page 2, where it was the comments that we made with respect to the rezoning application on the Hopewell Road property. I thought what I said was the general store could be rezoned to the newly created zoning district, not that it should be rezoned. If I did say should, I shouldn't have, but I don't remember that that's what I said, so.
I think you said could.
Could.
That's the only change that I have, Robin.
That's fine, I can take that.
Any other changes, corrections? Okay, we need a motion to approve those minutes.
Second.
The motion was made by Commissioner Kramer and seconded by Commissioner Edwards.
Yeah.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that was also 4-0. We only had 4 here. Okay, Robin, you want to call the
Yeah.
first and only item?
Yes, big item is RZ 12-01 to amend Article 6, Division 2, the AG1 Agricultural District, as it relates to allowing structures housing animals within the front yard. I did a little background for you all, basically stating that a big issue since we've become a city is barns being allowed in the front yard. Currently, they are not. So basically, this text amendment changes that criteria that allows both barns and riding rings that are shelter covered. Regular riding rings already are allowed to be wherever without any structure over it. So that's basically what the text amendment's doing. Another item that we came up with was just enforcing 3 or 4 board fencing along public right-of-ways within the AG1 district. Within our overlay, northwest overlay, that has a requirement for non-residential uses to have that, but we've come into problems with subdivisions or whatever. They want to put up a wall or they want to put up a opaque fence, and that's not consistent. It's not consistent with the intent, I believe, of the overlay, and the overlay only addresses non-residential multifamily, so we still have a lot of other parcels to deal with. So this, we thought, an opportunity to help fix that. So that was where this fencing kind of came out of the left field, but we've had some variances lately and things that we really didn't like. And so, not a matter of liking, but was inconsistent, I believe, with the intent of where we want to see the city go. So if you have any questions about that, I would be happy, or any comments. And we do have one person in the audience that would like to make a comment too, so.
Okay.
And that is Laura Bentley, if you want to come up.
Hi there. I wanted to say thank you first to all of you for,
Or just for the record, we
sorry.
know who you are, but
Laura Bentley, can you hear me? 2500 Bethany Church Road, Milton. And going back to my thank you, this is hard work, and we appreciate all that you do as volunteers. I'm here to speak in favor of the allowing structures housing animals within the front yard. About a year ago in January, a group of us formed the Milton Horse Council, which is really not a good name. We didn't spend a lot of time naming ourselves, but it's a group of people that are either have boarding operations, commercial equestrian operations. It's a mixture of people that earn their living in the city of Milton with using horses. And part of our mission was to figure out how, what we could do to enhance the equestrian life here and to save it from diminishing. So this group, one of the priorities was to figure out a way to work with the city to improve the ability to have commercial equestrian properties or even just private farms. There were many members of the group that brought to our attention that they had looked at properties to bring equestrian business here to Milton. And because of where the housing was situated on the property, usually at the end of a long driveway at the back, it prohibited them from considering that property for equestrian use because of the unknown, the barn can't be in front of the house. So as we discussed this was, I believe Chris Lagerbloom came to our meeting and asked us to put together a list, and this was one of the items that many of us talked about that it could be, we thought, easily improved. Now, I'm speaking from a very narrow perspective, and you all have a broad perspective on this. So with regard to the Horse Council, and we would definitely support this. I know that my property, my house, and my barn are very close. It's maybe just they're almost right next to each other. So there are many instances, I think, where properties in our city could be used for equestrian uses if this was changed so that it could accommodate that. And then the question would be, does that support our city's mission statement? And I think it does, because we do want to try to enhance and preserve the rural lifestyle. So that's pretty much it. I think the 4-board fencing and the 3-board fencing is a great thing. I think it has a great look and feel for our community. And it is expensive, and please always consider 3-board as being a very small change, and it does make a difference cost-wise. So thank you for the chance to speak.
thank you.
Okay.
I move we close public comment.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, unanimous. Public comments closed. Questions for staff?
I have a few.
Go ahead, Fred.
First of all, Robin, it seems to me that we're just talking about horses.
It should say,
Now, I notice in number 2, it says specialized farming, horticulture, plant nursery. So are we saying any type of barn? I mean, I hear what Laura's saying as far as where she's coming from, and certainly agree. But I do have considerable problems with changing this amendment to where the zoning is not going to be making the final, final decision. You know, you could,
It's not just horses, it's, on page 2, it says accessory buildings housing animal allowed on site.
Okay.
Yes.
okay, all right. So that's my point.
Could be a chicken coop.
Exactly. I'm concerned, certainly if the people come and they want a riding stable in their front yard and they had a 100-acre farm and their house sets 300 feet off the road or 500 feet, I don't have a problem with that. But I think that we ought to have somebody, some group that is making a decision as to whether or not, you know, this is proper. If you're a property owner next to this and you have a barn that's up, you know, you're setting out near the road, and all at once you've got a barn that goes up and they put up a chicken coop, or my favorite, as everyone mostly knows on the council, a hog farm. I don't think that we would want that. So I'm basically opposed to changing the amendment.
I want to make sure, and before we get into other questions or comments, I want to make sure I understand the intent behind the wording here, because I had a lot of trouble with this. The change to A4 inserts the word non-accessory, which is not a defined term in our definition, so I'm assuming it's intended to be something other than an accessory use.
Correct, yes.
So we're saying that a permitted use is a riding arena, which is either covered or uncovered, as opposed to a riding stable, because that's been taken out. So we're taking stables out, and I'm trying to make sure, because what I heard Laura say is riding stables, boarding, and so on. The way this is written, it's taking stables out of the equation and inserted instead riding arenas, either covered or uncovered. And so I'm trying to understand what we're really trying to do here, plus the fact that this now is allowing what's defined as a non-accessory riding arena, and yet all the changes over on the next page in section I are with respect to accessory buildings, which is not the riding arena.
Right.
So what are we trying to accomplish? Because I don't know that the language that's here, at least, is consistent with what I thought we were trying to accomplish.
I think there's another section of the ordinance that addresses the non-accessory, or what we would consider a commercial, without a house on it, that was the primary use. That's the intent, is if that's the primary use, a non-accessory.
What is the primary use? The
non-accessory
residence.
riding arena, covered or uncovered. Just like it had originally, riding stable other than accessory, meaning it needs to be, it would be more of a commercial, let's say if it was just a farm, if it was a commercial farm without a residence, it was just AG1.
So forget the language. What I'm asking is, what are we trying to define as a permitted use? What are we trying to change here? Are we trying to allow riding stables and riding arenas, whether they're covered or uncovered, as permitted uses?
Right.
So we're trying to define them as permitted uses as opposed to accessory uses.
Correct, it's
Yeah, so
the
they don't have
opposite
to
way,
request
it would be, there are riding arenas, covered or uncovered. That's what I was trying to say, was that this paragraph is addressing the standards for like a commercial where there would not be a residence on the property. So that was the main use of the property, is the stables and the farm.
Well, if there is a residence on the property, the stable or the farm, the stable or the riding arena would not be an accessory use.
Correct, that's why it's called a non-accessory riding arena,
So,
blah, blah, blah.
again, I'm trying to make sure, so to the extent that I live on the property where I have my stable or my arena, we're now saying that that's no longer permitted.
No, because then when you go back to I on the second page, accessory building, so if you have your primary residence there,
But it's no longer an accessory because we've defined it out of here because that's not incidental to the principal use of the property.
well, that's how we define it. If you have a residence and then you have a barn and you have stables, then those are accessory to the primary use of the house.
An accessory use is defined to be a use which is subordinate and used customarily incidental to the principal use of the lot.
Right. And that's where the majority of people, they'll have a house and they'll want to build a barn for their, 2 or 3 horses. And so that's that's where we get the
And storing their 2 or
accessory.
3 horses, I would say, is incidental. When it becomes a commercial business, it's not incidental anymore.
Correct, and that's where we address it on A, on the first page, the non-accessory. When it's a primary use. I mean, we can change that word from non-accessory to primary, or,
I guess I don't understand, again, let's go back to what we're trying to accomplish. We're trying to say that forgetting about the language, that a permitted use is a riding stable or a riding arena, whether it's covered or uncovered, as long as it's not the principal use on the property?
I mean, that's already allowed by AG1. If it's,
But it's not. I mean, it is now, but you're eliminating it. You're crossing out riding stables.
well, I think that there's another section that addresses it, but, I mean, we can put in, just to make sure that everybody understands that, that a riding stable or a stable or barn that's the primary use can be, needs to be at least 100 feet from all property lines. I mean, that's all we're saying. They have to be 100 feet.
Right. Well, but you're saying more than that. You're saying it has to be 100 feet, but you're also saying it's a permitted use.
Right, I mean, because that's a permitted use up in 2.
So
Because it
if-
says that buildings used for housing animals must be at least 100, it's already a known use that you can do that.
Right, but riding arenas are not. That's my whole point. Isn't all we're trying to do is to add riding arenas, covered or uncovered, as an additional permitted use?
Well, and a barn.
Well,
And/or stable. But to your point.
No, the stable's already there.
Stable's already there.
Stable was there.
No, that's my point. I mean, instead of crossing that out, aren't we just adding riding arenas as an additional permitted use?
I mean, we can do that, we can put back riding stable, that's fine.
But we ought to take out non-accessory.
That's,
That's what's confusing me, is
Okay.
inserting the word non-accessory there.
And is riding, oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
but we need to replace it with some other word, so it would differentiate it from the accessory, to make it clear. I mean, I'm fine with, I know that can be confusing, non-accessory, I mean, it's kind of like reverse.
Why do you have to specify one or the other? Why can't you just say riding stables?
And
I mean, arenas, riding arenas.
Well, I think it goes back to when you use that for a commercial use, it has to be at least 10 acres. When it's a non-accessory use, we addressed that on the second page, but I think it just makes it clear that if you somehow identify it as a non-accessory use, it's you could say the primary use.
But how do you, this gets back to, I mean, that's a different point, but how do you define whether it's a accessory use or not? I mean, if it's the only thing on the property, it's obviously not an accessory use, right? But if what differentiates what differentiates a commercial business versus somebody that is keeping their horses in a barn?
Well, we can't, to be honest, I mean, there's a lot of people who have their house and then they board horses and they have lessons and they have all that. So that's something that we haven't really dealt with right yet, to how to differentiate when do you put that person from a hobby farm or just the family fun horse farm to somebody who's making money.
Okay,
So that-
well, no, but so the ordinance, the way it was written today, allows any of that because it's a riding stable, right?
Right.
When you add riding arenas, same question. If it's a riding arena that's there for a commercial business, are we trying to define that differently than a riding arena that's not there for commercial use? I'm where Joe is. I don't really understand why we need to characterize it as a non-accessory or something else and just say a permitted use is riding arenas and stables, or riding stables and riding arenas.
And to be really picky, but is the appropriate terminology riding stable and riding arena? I mean,
I don't know. That's a lore
it just needs
question.
to be a stable, right?
Does
Well,
riding stables cover everything but arenas?
There's not a riding stable, it's either a stable or a riding arena. It's two separate.
Do you want to come up here so you can be on?
I mean, you have a stable where you house the horses, and then there's a riding arena, two separate.
So if I think about, as an example, if I think about the property that's on Hopewell Road right across from Seven Oaks, or not Seven Oaks, Bethany Oaks. What is it? It's not Bethany Oaks.
At the runner property.
Runner,
Yeah.
Yellow House.
That's not a riding arena, and it's certainly not a riding stable. What is that?
That's a pretty big commercial operation.
But there's a cover,
It-
a lot of times people come to want to cover a riding, just like I said, we don't have a problem with a riding ring if it's just without any cover, but once you put a cover on it, then it starts being an issue. And then I think riding stable, maybe they're thinking of it totally foreclosed, where you could do it in the wintertime and you could ride in it.
Okay, and that's what people would call an indoor arena.
Yeah.
So I know
So
it's
it's not just covered or
covered.
uncovered.
Yeah,
it's
I mean, I think you
indoor.
would want to, you'd want to specify covered, which is what you see at the Yellow House, because you can see through that. And indoor is an enclosed riding arena, which, I mean, you're getting into things you might not want.
I'm not aware. Is
We
there?
don't have
Can you
any.
give an example? Are there any of those in Milton?
Very few. There's one on Birmingham, but you have to go all the way down that long driveway, and there is an indoor arena
Is that
there.
the one near Canterbury?
It's right across. It's
Across from Hampton.
no Birmingham Road, right there.
Near Henderson?
Yeah, I can't remember
Can't
the
see it from the road.
property owner, but
What's the
Dave,
Shannondale?
Shannondale
is
is-
a open.
is that
Right.
open?
It is
Yeah,
open. At least
open.
I don't
The old
There's
Stars
probably, I think,
soccer
just
facility,
one.
Or the current Star soccer facility was an
Right.
indoor.
That's
riding
it. That's an
Okay.
indoor
Okay.
one too.
Okay.
That was an indoor. And there's probably just one more, but I mean, I could foresee those indoors are big structures that you might not want in front,
Right, you'd have to have conditioned air.
or in covered
air
ones
handling
too,
units and those
Yeah,
kinds of
yeah.
things.
because those are bigger. I mean, I live here too, so a barn that architecturally fits in with a house, I think I'm cool with that, but the big structures might be a whole different animal, so.
I mean, and typically, I think that's why there's the minimum 10 acres for a commercial one. So, but if it's that you don't want any, again, we've had 3 or 4 requests for covered rings just on the roof. That would have been accessory structure, so.
Are those variances always approved?
Well, one, they got mad because they didn't like all the things that we required them to
Conditions,
do
yeah.
for the variance, because it was an issue if it was larger than 25,000 square feet, and so they needed a variance for it, and there were just a lot of issues. They just felt like that we were being too stringent, so they never built it. So, it's not that it was unheard of. I mean, we've had 2 or 3 covered rings come in, and a lot of times they have to get a variance because of the northwest overlay of not allowing a structure larger than 25,000 square feet. So, but if you wanted to do a smaller one, I mean, if that's not something, if you don't want the riding arena in the front, then that's
I'm okay with a riding arena in the front.
covered.
Covered.
Okay.
that you can see through,
Right.
providing it is in keeping architecturally with the surrounding area.
Right, and those go to the design review board, so.
Right.
But it sounds
Yeah, it doesn't
like,
sound like that's the case.
Yeah.
Right.
Sounds like it's just a structural steel,
I mean, it can't be
covered
very
facility.
creative, I agree, no. And I think that's when they get to the larger one, a lot of people go away because they don't want to deal with the variance of the 25,000 square foot
Well,
structure.
and it doesn't sound like that's what this committee was looking for either. Like I said, they're looking for a stable or slash barn. They're not looking for, a covered riding arena in the front of the property.
Right.
Well, that's fine.
Yeah, stables, barns, and rings and covered riding areas should be something we would support.
But he just said the
No,
opposite.
I wouldn't support a covered riding area.
And that's what the covered ring is.
Yeah.
But
Right.
that's something that the Equestrian people want. I mean,
And that's not what she said.
no,
Well, it
she's talking
depends
about
on-
Indoor.
She's talking about indoor.
Yeah, I think,
There's really not a demand for indoors. It's kind of they inherited the one that's, in the Star Soccer one, they closed down. So because of our weather, I don't think that will, but you have to plan for that someone might want that. Okay, if you wanted to go, when you're on Bethany Way, Karen Kirby, Pleasant Hill Farm, has a covered riding arena. You look and you can see right through it, and it's back. And I think everyone would think it was fine, but, and I think if you're going to allow it to be in front of a residence, I mean, that is what you have to determine if that's something that close to the road.
Just no matter what, without
Right.
even having to come in here and ask for anything, other than just the design review.
I
Rather have to go for a variance.
I just think that you would want to go and at least see. Karen's is pretty far off the road. And I'm just trying to imagine, I mean, the one that will give you the best perspective is the yellow house. That's as close to the road, I think, is maybe what you would be considering as well. So my farm, I am surrounded by residents, and I'm just trying to imagine if, I did that, which is kind of what happened over there at the Yellow House. It's very close, and I don't want to do anything to hurt, bringing equestrian operations here, but most operations that are going to have the money to build a covered arena will be commercial. So it's almost like you'd have to think about where that particular parcel was in relation to neighborhoods, and so there's a set of variables that would be complicated.
Laura, in the case of the group that you're a part of, have there been any examples where we have lost potential equestrian families or small businesses because they would have been prohibited to do a covered riding ring? It's more been we may have lost somebody because of the fear of not getting a barn approved in front of the house, correct? House or ring?
Yeah, I mean, I hear more about people wanting to buy properties, for private use, hobby use. What I do, I board a couple horses. I keep my kids' show horses there, and there's a demand for people to move into Milton and do the same thing. And there's only so many properties in that price range that fit the hobby / private farm. And those are the ones that people really want to grab up. But there's the unknown of, well, could I put a barn in front of the house if I have to? It's not ideal. None of us want to do that. But if you want to live in Milton and have your kids go to these schools and so on and so forth, there's only so many places. The dilemma on the covered riding arenas is your average hobby farm, private farm, isn't going to put something like that in. So I think it would be safe to assume that that would be more of a commercial operation with lights and possibly speakers. Because if you make that investment, you're in it as a business. I would think. I mean, I can't think of anyone that has a covered arena that is private. I don't know.
Well, there has been requests, and I
Okay.
think that I believe that over on Hopewell, on the lower part of Hopewell on the west side, that they came in for the use permit for the school years ago. A private family has bought it, and that he's building everything for his daughter. And this is not the first time that it's happened. So I will say that there are
you're right.
people
That was.
and I mean, again, we have to be prepared for those 2 or 3 or 4
Right.
people. And their topo goes such that you can't see it as much because it goes lower, but
Right.
they have their barn is bigger than their huge house. And they had to get a variance for that. And I can't remember whether they have a covered riding rink. I'm sure if they don't have it yet, they're planning on it.
Well,
The one or two variances a year for something like that.
Yeah,
Even if you, I don't even see you getting 2 a year or something like that.
Well, that's true, but I mean,
But
we
having
just-
a-
we
You made-
did that to see what the reaction would be, and if we don't need it, then that's fine.
Well, you made the point that I was headed to. I mean, your write-up, I think, is good, and it talks about the desire to allow things in the front yard, and then what happened is that somehow we got the arena question in here
Yeah.
as well, right?
It's-
And so to me, we've mixed two things.
Right.
I personally don't know that I would say we need to change A4 to accomplish the idea of trying to get barns into the front yard, because that's really what I talks about.
I mean, I would ask if you do go back, but just keep the strikeout on the last sentence, because we got rid of it because it gets very confusing, because there's other,
Well, I agree with that.
yeah, so,
But I also would agree, if we're talking about riding stables, why we say building housing animals as opposed to saying building housing horses, unless we're gonna ride other things.
well, I mean, there could be people who keep sheep. I know there's.
But they
already
don't, but they don't ride sheep, do
Well,
they?
that's true.
No, but that's
But
my
that
whole
house-
point. Is this, the way I read it, according to RZ 12-01, says allowing structures housing animals. It doesn't say just horses.
Yeah,
Right.
but you
But
gotta
where
look,
does it,
well, you gotta look at, that's my
differentiate?
point. If you go back to the original language of section 4, it starts off by saying the permitted use is a riding stable. So unless we're gonna ride sheep,
Well-
that's why, to me, I agree with you, Fred, it would be easier to change that and say the building's housing horses,
right,
Yes.
right?
then that, I don't have a problem with that.
Okay.
It's just,
Because that also, I'm sorry.
go ahead.
I have one other fear that I want to sort of get into the discussion is if the intent is to be friendly to the equestrian community, which I think should be our objective, we should find a way to accommodate a structure that would house these horses. And it should be about, barns or a barn structure. I don't want it to be a structure that we then have a whole bunch of other permitted things within it, where once you put it up, you can't tell what's inside it. It shouldn't be a place where a guy can choose to build a race car. And you've got trailers coming and going and the things that are appropriate to having a racing
Right.
business. It should be defined pretty narrowly to support the equestrian community. So if we do say, a stable or barn structure, and we strike the rest of the animal stuff, in my mind, we're getting where we want to go.
Right. And then we just need to do the same thing in I, instead of saying accessory building housing animals, we can go back to saying riding stable.
No, I wouldn't say riding stable, I would say barn or stable.
Okay.
Why would you not say housing horses?
Yeah, I would go ahead. I
We
think
could
would
do that
even-
too.
I
Yeah,
think that would
it's a
like
good
lead 'em
point.
even more.
That's a good point.
That'd be fine.
So we're saying that the premise of AG1 is to have agricultural, general, specialized farming, including horticulture, plant nursery, greenhouse, dairy farming, livestock raising, poultry raising. So we're saying that If they really can't do that.
Move that in front.
No, we're not saying they
No,
can't
no.
do that, it's just that we don't want in the front yard.
Okay, so.
Right.
Okay, so you're just saying that only horses can stay in the front.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. I guess the other part is enforcement, to be honest. You know, you have one owner who's gonna come in as a horse farmer. You know, I'm not really sure unless their next door neighbor narcs on them and realizes they're not supposed to have any other use in it. I'm just throwing it out there that, you know, it's not gonna be a perfect situation because what if they bring in sheep? What if they bring in,
Yeah, but we'll see them out on the pasture.
Yeah, especially if they're in the front yard.
If they're riding them.
But it's,
You know, I mean,
I'm okay with
okay,
that.
I mean, I'm just saying, you know.
you're right to my point, Robin. Exactly. I mean, you can, if it's specifically horses, that's fine. But how, now are you going to enforce it? We got enough problems, which I'll get into later, on this enforcement. So, you know, how are you going to,
I'm
everybody going to
not
ride
saying, you know,
around?
so long as we still allow other things, and I will say there's other sections of the city ordinance, like with hogs and chickens, we have other animal ordinances that require other distances. Just FYI, I'm not trying to have you say, you know, but
that's
there
fine.
are other, and that's why I even changed later on to a minimum of 150 feet from any occupied building, because that's what the other part of the code said. So I didn't want it to be in conflict, but right currently we don't have that, so. Anyway, just food for thought. I was just gonna throw that out, but.
So now what do we do with A4?
I would say that, I have a proposal that A4 read as follows: riding stables and barns for housing horses, semicolon.
Just do stables.
Huh?
Stables and barns.
Okay, stables and barns for housing horses, semicolon, provided buildings are at least 100 feet from all property lines and the lot is not less than 10 acres, period, end.
What happened to the riding arenas, though?
They have to be in the.
I don't
think you need
want
to
that as a
cover it.
permitted use, personally.
Well,
I mean, I'm with Chris. I think people, that's something that's going to come off infrequently enough that people should come in for a variance.
A riding
That's-
ring
Even
or
uncovered one?
Huh?
Even an uncovered one?
Yeah. A riding arena to me implies a structure. A riding ring, to me,
It's
is
just a fenced area.
an open area in a field, and I don't
Yeah,
object to
with-
that.
I disagree. I think a uncovered riding arena is just a ring. Correct me if I'm wrong.
So they put up bleachers and they,
Lights.
and lights and,
Yep. If you remember the one that was at Webb and McGinnis Ferry, the old one there before it was all torn down, they had lights and stuff around that riding arena, and it was open air.
so this deals only with the larger commercial ones, what we're editing right now.
what do you mean?
Well, yeah, unless we get rid of everything in, I, on the second page. Because this whole paragraph dealt with, what we used to call the non-accessory, the primary use of typically would be commercial, would one have to have 10 acres, and now you're saying they can only have barns and stables, but they can't have any kind of arena. It
So you-
doesn't
so you don't
quite
even
make
need
sense.
that.
I know.
Just scratch the whole thing and you're left with A2.
Yeah, really.
I'm just saying, before you get rid of even a covered riding ring, I mean, I think that would, and you have 10 acres, we could say it still would be required to be, well, there wouldn't be behind anything because that's the primary use. So it would be outside of the minimum setbacks or the 100 feet from all property lines. So I'm not sure if you want to go that far. I understand that for just what we call the accessory ones, not to have a riding arena. But I'm not sure if we're going the right direction for a commercial one. We're doing exactly the opposite.
Yeah, but this isn't a commercial zone.
But I know, when I say commercial, I mean but they allow agricultural uses, and that we don't, just like with Shannondale or with the Runner Farm, those are commercial, and, I mean, they make money. They They board, they have lessons, they do whatever,
But
and,
that's an issue that we ignore.
Exactly, that's all grandfathered in, wasn't it?
No,
well, I
no,
mean, it's not even
We
grandfathered
just ignore
in,
it.
it's just, it's been allowed in AG1.
Well, I'm not, yeah, but we're mixing two things. I mean, we ignore the fact that that's commercial. Do they have a business license?
The bigger ones do, they do come in.
All the ones that are collecting revenue for
I'm not
the-
saying all of them, I
Okay.
said some of the bigger ones, I'm not saying all of them do.
Okay.
Most of, I just, a comment on that, most of your trainers that are running operations like that do have business licenses because of the
larger ones.
in order for them to get their insurance as trainers, which they need and have to have, they have to have a business license. So there is a little bit of a check and balance there.
But a farm that's doing nothing but boarding horses probably doesn't, right?
I mean, some, half and half. I mean, I think you probably get to a point where, if you have 4 or more, you would have a business license.
Okay, so if we're trying to figure out how to accommodate a barn, a stable, and a riding area uncovered in A4, because that's really what we're at. We want to, if you go back to the beginning of this, and we're trying to make sure that we are friendly to a potential new resident to Milton that wants to be engaged in the activities around riding and keeping horses. If one of the biggest concerns is the ability to put a barn in front of a home because that property is perfect for them and that's the primary hurdle, if it said stables and barns for housing horses and uncovered riding areas or rings or whatever other word you want to put there, provided at least 100 feet from all property lines and not less than 10 acres, have we accommodated what we're at?
But the
there?
problem is, we're mixing apples with oranges. That's not what we're talking about to appease the equestrian. Just people move in and they want to have a hobby farm. They already have their residence there, so this A4 is
Doesn't
not.
apply to them.
That doesn't apply to them. What applies to them is on the next page.
Right. So
For the accessory.
A4 only applies to somebody that comes in, buys property, wants to put up a barn or riding ring, no house on it.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right. It's a business as opposed to a residential use.
Right, so my point still stands, though. If they want to build a stable or a barn
Okay.
for the purpose of housing horses,
Okay.
and they want to ride on that property in an uncovered area, provided it meets the setback and the acreage requirements, we should be okay with that.
Right. That's okay. But I thought you were talking about more like a family and all
No,
that stuff. Okay.
No, I'm
No, I
referring
agree.
to a family that wants to buy the property, but.
Okay.
But
But
Paul, you don't even need the riding stables because that's covered in A2.
Yeah.
The only
Same here.
issue is the riding arena and the lot not less than 10 acres. That's the
Good
only
point.
issue.
Can we wind the tape back a minute? I want to make sure I understand what you just said, Robin, because I quite honestly don't. If somebody's coming in and there's a house on the property and they want to put up a barn in front of it, did you say this does not apply?
In this section, they would go to the second page. If they were going to use that as a primary, I guess, make a caveat to that. If they were going to live on the property in that house and they wanted to put a barn in the front, then it would apply to the second page as
I-1, yeah.
as I-1
As an
because it's an
accessory building.
accessory structure to the primary use, which is the residential.
And right now, I mean, from a real estate standpoint, you've got people coming in or people who own those properties, you can't resell them because you've got people trying to buy them with the cloud hanging over it saying, well, I don't know if I can build a barn in front of this house, so I'm not going to buy your house.
Right.
That's
Yeah,
it.
but I'm still, time out, I'm still back on the first point, because I don't read that this way. Maybe that's the intent. If I go in and buy a house, and I'm going to live there, and I want to put a barn up, I understand that in terms of where I put that barn, the second page applies. But whether I can put the barn there or not, the first page applies.
Yeah.
A2.
No, B. It's an accessory use. A building or land may be used for.
Well, it's not an accessory use if I mean, let's forget about horses for a minute. Let's say I go buy a house and I want to put up a roadside stand on the front of my property to sell vegetables. Is that an accessory use?
I mean, it's allowed use.
It's a permitted
accessory.
use, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So why is that different than a barn? They're both permitted uses. Nothing says that you can only have one use on a piece of property, right? They're all permitted uses.
But they're
That's why you're at
accessory to
A2.
the primary residence.
But it doesn't say that, right? I mean, which is incidental to which?
I
You
mean,
have the definition.
It says an accessory use is,
Any,
it says
yeah,
accessory use
any
is customary and incidental to any permitted use. Well, the permitted use is both the barn and the house.
Well, I think she's going to go get the definition of accessory versus primary.
I've got it right here, Robin.
well, let me just take the whole ordinance anyway.
I copied it out of the ordinance. It means a subordinate use which is customarily incidental to the principal use of a lot and which is located on the same lot as the principal use.
That's accessory use.
Yeah, which is what it says there, basically. But like you said, the question is what's like you said, what's the primary use of the property?
But it doesn't matter. If
They're all
Well,
permitted.
it does matter. It does matter to determine what the accessory use
But
is.
you don't have to go there. If you have a piece of property and you want to put a barn in, it's permitted use.
I
It's a
can have,
building for housing animals.
I can put if I got 100 acres, I can put a kennel and a
dairy
roadside
farm, a
stand and a
poultry.
barn and,
Yep.
Yeah.
you know, raise pigs and sheep and all that's permitted.
The only thing that's not permitted is the riding arena. Unless it's changed.
Well, seeing even there, I mean,
You could argue.
I
that
would
that's-
argue.
that's-
I
that's
would
incidental to
strongly
the-
argue that is allowed. I don't see where like she's trying to split hairs between accessory and non-accessory. I don't see. The only way I guess it sounds like it's non-accessory is if there's no house. If it's just land,
Well,
then if there's nothing on it, then you can't have any accessory use because there's nothing on
but
it.
you don't need it. If it's land, you go to permitted uses, A2, buildings used for housing animals.
But that's not a riding arena.
I know, but that's my point.
Yeah.
You have to add riding arena under A4 in order to allow that to happen
Without the
in
house.
a not, in a.
If you want it to be a permitted use.
Yes,
Right.
yes, yes. All right, I think we finally got that clarified.
Okay, just for my own clarification. I agree with all the things you just said, but just for clarification. So basically A4 is simply describing use, not location.
Right.
Yep.
That's the whole
Yep.
point.
But it's
Right.
missing, well, let me say it differently. We had the opportunity to be further definitive by putting riding
Right.
arena in there.
Could be
It's
added.
not necessarily required if we all understand that by omission, it is included.
And it sounds like it already was previously,
And then,
because a riding stable is not the accurate terminology. I mean, the way that I think we read a riding stable is a riding arena. So if you're going to make any change, take out stable and put riding arena other than accessory provided, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah,
That's
an
really-
uncovered riding arena, other than accessory, is at least 100 feet from all property lines and not
Yeah,
less than 10 acres.
that's really what that should read for permitted use. Because then, like you said, the barn is going to be covered.
covered under A2.
the-
Under
yeah.
A2,
right,
And then, whether it can be in front of the house is I.
right.
okay,
Yep.
I can buy
So
that.
say that again, how you want it to work.
A4,
Okay,
I'm suggesting that it read uncovered riding arena,
okay.
other than accessory, provided arena is at least 100 feet from all property lines and lot is not less than 10 acres.
Joe, help me with the value of adding the other than accessory in there, as opposed to just saying uncovered?
Yeah, you're right. You don't need that. You don't need that, because the other is the placement. You're right, you don't need it.
Can I just ask about the 10 acres, though?
That's already in there, right? We didn't
Yeah,
add
they're not
that.
striking that.
Kathy, what's your question?
But
Is
is that going
that
to
too big?
accomplish what you're looking for? That you need 10 acre in order to build a riding or
Have a
an
permitted
uncovered
use of an
riding arena?
uncovered riding arena.
We need 10 acres to have it as a permitted use. That doesn't mean somebody with less than that couldn't ask for it, I guess, right? As a variance.
Yeah, I'm assuming the purpose of that provision is so you wouldn't have an acre lot and boom, somebody puts a
Right.
riding arena on it.
Well, but right now, we don't exclude riding arenas from a smaller one, but this was intended to be for commercial type, other than accessory. So that's why we said non-accessory riding, non-accessory, you could say uncovered, provided it's at least 100 feet. So again, we go back to this was primarily for the commercial type use. I mean, not to say a private farm can't be 10 acres, but.
If we don't
for a
change any of
minimum.
this language, walk through that again. I've got a 1 acre lot and I want to put a riding arena uncovered in front of my property. Or not in front. Let's say we don't make any changes. I want to put a riding arena on my property and I've got 1 acre.
And if you could fit it in and be outside the minimum setback, we'd have to be 100, we would,
But tell me
Or-
why that is allowed without having a review of it. It's not a permitted use.
well, I mean, a riding arena cover, you mean uncovered, just a ring, just a ring with fences around it. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's fine.
That's just a use that's allowed because there's no
Why is it
structure
allowed?
with it.
What I'm-
Because it's associated with agricultural, general, and specialized farming. I mean, that's just a use that's used in equestrian farming is to have a riding ring or to have, with fences around it. And we don't even make an agricultural use to have a
Equestrian and
fence.
farming to me are two different things.
But it's included in permitted uses under AG1.
You're saying it's under A2?
Yeah, right. It's it's agricultural. And
I-
even above, it says that the district, the AG1 district is intended to encompass lands devoted to a wide range of uses, including agricultural, and then it goes down to be more specific about agricultural, general and specialized farming, including horticulture, plant nursery, greenhouse, dairy farming,
I
life.
see all of that. I don't see anything that looks like a riding arena in
But
there.
that's just a known use to that type of equestrian or specialized farming.
I agree with you.
That's kind of like saying you can't have a sheep pen.
It's like a necessity. If you have
No, a sheep
barn,
pen is something
you have to have a
different.
place to ride.
I don't see it as being much different
Why?
because you have an area where the horse can ride.
But you can,
But it's fenced
but you
in,
can do the
so
same
long as
thing
it's
with
not-
horses. You can have open fields. You can have stables, barns, whatever.
Yeah.
Right? Riding arenas to me, that's like saying you're going to have a show pavilion for sheep.
Well, but if they need lights, they're going to have to come and get
Lights
lights.
are
But
not.
I don't see any different. If you have a fenced-in riding area that's like per se to, dressage, because there's certain, size for dressage they have to be, and they create this fencing that becomes where they ride. I don't see how that's anything but
Well,
a
it's
part of the
comparable
farm.
to a fenced-in pasture.
Right.
One is passive, one is active. It's still a use related to
The farming,
The farming.
or the
So-
agriculture.
Yeah, so, as Robin said, has certain distances from point to point for
Right.
dressage purposes. It's a certain shape, it's got a certain kind of dirt that they use and all the special.
Where we come into problem is when they start covering it, and then that becomes a structure, and then that, we start, we've had some fairly large ones come in to ask to come in, and we have the Northwest, where the majority of the farms are, and then, if it's more than 25,000 square foot structure, then it goes into another category, they have to get a variance. So I see that as just a part of the operation of, even if it was a hobby farm, you could have a fenced-in area to ride.
Well, it may be just me on the outside looking in here, but if we take 4 out completely, unless we do something with 2, I don't see even what's going on today fitting in here as a permitted use. I mean,
I'm not
I
saying-
personally have trouble with that.
Well, I'm not saying taking out all of 4, but I mean, we need to, I think there needs, at least the intent of the ordinance was to differentiate between your accessory barn / equestrian use versus something that's larger, and that's the primary use, and I think that's 4 deals with that. We can't just get rid of it, I don't think, unless you just let a commercial farm go in on 2 acres. And, you know, that could be okay. You could still have a family own 2 acres and have their horses on it, and it's no big deal. But then you could have somebody come in and do some pretty intensive equestrian activities.
Again, if I go back to your write-up, I mean, we're spending all of our time talking about something that wasn't even the intent. I mean, the whole intent was to deal with what can be put in the front yard.
Right.
Okay, yeah.
So,
And that's why I'm fine if we want to just revert back to how it was written before, but we're still accommodating, not accommodating, but we're still having rules for the larger farm that's not a hobby farm, that's non-accessory, then that's fine. We can take it out. That's not a problem. We can get rid of the red and just leave what was there before.
Well, change riding stable to riding arena. Covered. Isn't the issue really the covered riding arena?
No, it's the lot size as well.
Yeah.
Well, right now, to have a covered riding arena, you could do that for 10 acres, covered. And then the others you could put into sort of the residential type use, which is the uncovered plus the barn.
So,
It
you're
doesn't say
saying, again, if we don't change anything, you're saying if I came in tomorrow and I had a 10-acre property, forgetting about the front yard for the moment, but I had a 10-acre property and I wanted to put a covered riding arena on my property, as long as it was 100 feet from all the property lines, that I could do that as a permitted use, and so I wouldn't even need to come before you to do that.
Correct, as long as it doesn't exceed 25,000 square feet.
Right,
If it's more than 4 acres, and then it's like 15,000 for under 4 acres.
right. So I could do that, and that's worrisome to me.
Well, 10 acres is a pretty good size
Well, I know that.
parcel, and we don't want to add a restriction.
But
that-
take the yellow house,
What,
right, as an example, because that's not in front of their house.
right.
They could come and do that tomorrow, is what I'm hearing, right? And I assumed when I read this that the whole reason for dealing with that is because we're trying to control that kind of thing from going in.
Not with the runner farm, we're not really addressing that. We're addressing the hobby, the smaller. I mean, I do agree that that was an issue, and that was done in Fulton County, that that's a I mean, you know, they claimed that it was, yeah, that's a whole nother ball of wax. So it goes back to our point of how to deal with the larger farms, commercial type. But it goes back to my memo, and I apologize for putting this in to cause all this problem, but we were trying to figure out anything else that needed to be dealt with. And that we have had covered arenas, and some of it was getting rid of that last sentence, because that becomes very confusing. So like I said before, we can go back to what it was, but still get rid of standards for keeping horses, blah, 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 because it's already addressed.
Let me ask you this. The 10 acres, do we want that to apply to both non-accessory and accessory uses?
That was not our intent. No, it would only be for non-accessory where it was, so.
Okay.
I mean-
So I go back to my original words, uncovered riding arena other than accessory.
Yeah, why can't it be uncovered riding arena, other than accessory, provided
Arena is
the
100
arena
feet.
is at
and
least
not
100
less than
feet
10
from all
acres.
property lines and not less than 10 acres? Haven't we nailed it?
Yes. Yes.
Because then if it's an accessory use, then
You
you
fall
go
down
to,
to I.
you go
Yeah.
to I and,
We're trying to allow uncovered.
right.
It's got setbacks, and they don't have to come before us if it's
a
less than 10
commercial,
acres.
Yeah.
Commercial,
Well, if
really,
it's 10
commercial or
acres.
otherwise.
Yeah.
Commercial or otherwise. And my attitude is we shouldn't have a problem with that, because that's consistent with the rural and equestrian community flavor that we're trying to promote and
So you're
preserve.
saying even for a lot larger than 10 acres, they couldn't do a covered arena?
Not without a variance.
Not without a variance.
Well, I think we're going backwards on that.
Why?
Well,
I mean, they have to get one now, right?
if it's larger than either 15 or 25,000, I mean, that's, that's-
They don't have to get one now.
Well,
Well, no, but if it's less than 15,000 on a 4 or, well, so that wouldn't equate, so if it was for the 10 acre, they would,
If it's
they
less
would
than
need to,
20
it'd have to be more than 25,000 to get a variance, so they could
To
build.
require a variance.
Oh, yeah,
That's my point. They can build one less than 25,000 now without a variance.
Right.
As long as it satisfies the 100 feet.
but you're
Covered.
saying they can't be
Covered.
covered, though,
No, right now they can.
right,
There's nothing that prevents it.
correct.
Right, so that kind of fixes the yellow issue ever coming up again. If you say covered, I'm sorry, let me say it differently. If we only say uncovered, the way Joe would like it to read, we've taken out the issue of the potential for the large yellow commercial entity happening again. If they want to build that, where right now it doesn't allow for it, they'd have to come before us for a variance, and that should be okay. That's the way I'd like to see that end up.
Okay.
The larger entities on larger lots, again, we probably should be okay with the way it's currently written, because that, again, today are standards that are not out of line with what the equestrian community has experienced before, and I don't see it as a hurdle to what we're trying to be as a equestrian-friendly community.
So when you say larger lot, you mean like 25 acres? That
Well,
means
larger than 10 acres.
But what I'm understanding is even larger than 10 acres from that wording, that the only thing that could be on there would be uncovered, unless I'm totally losing it.
As a permitted use.
Okay.
Permitted use.
They would have to get a variance for a covered arena.
But you just said it would be okay to have.
I'm correcting myself with
Okay.
what they're saying.
So under no circumstances is it okay, residential or commercial use, to have a covered dressage area or whatever, or riding arena without a variance?
Correct.
That's what you're saying.
Yeah, and that's a sizable structure coming into our rural and equestrian community. It's not inconsistent with the equestrian community to want to have that, but we should have a say in where it goes and what the setting is and what the setbacks are. And is it consistent with the surrounding areas, even if it's on a 25-acre property?
How about if it's in the rear?
Yeah, I know, and because this doesn't address, it's still assuming that it's going to be in the right place. We're not saying that it can be. We're not saying anything about it being in the front.
Even if
We're
it's
just
in the
talking
rear, I
about-
think that's a sizable structure and it should have to come before us. Because even if it's on the rear, there could be another adjoining property where that homeowner should have some rights preserved.
Correct.
I mean, they
Even if
could
it's
get-
set back with the appropriate distances, 25,000 square foot structure is a big structure. And we should probably have that come before us. Not that we would say no, because again, we want to promote a friendly equestrian environment here, but provided you've ensured the other property owners' rights from setbacks, and it may be in a situation where they may have to take down trees to do that, and they were looking for something pastoral or forested or whatever, and suddenly a 25,000 square foot structure is going to significantly change that.
I don't want to drag this out, but, if I was next door to that, I wouldn't really care whether it was covered or not. If it's a 25,000 square foot riding arena, it's going to bother me whether
Right.
it's covered or not. I don't care whether it's got a roof on it. It's the 25,000 square foot arena that would
Yeah,
bother
in both
me.
cases, though, it indicates commercial
Yeah,
at that point.
yeah.
Well, covered certainly more than uncovered, but
Absolutely.
both could.
Right.
I mean, again,
What- I mean, this-
not to drag it out,
this
but I
is
get
throwing
hung up on the
another ball
word
into it,
arena,
but-
because arena to me is.
A riding area.
You're talking about an area and a ring, and I'm okay with that. When you talk about arena,
Yeah.
So,
You know.
this is throwing something out, and then we can't solve it tonight, but what if we created a special use permit for those type uses, that if they want it, I just don't like things going to the BZA just for all these exceptions. I would rather be it in the positive
well,
way.
we just got through saying, I think, that there might be one that used to be here. We don't even have any covered arenas.
I don't,
That, right?
Well, I'm not talking about on all four sides. I mean, I really do think that in the last 5 years, there's been 3 or 4 requests for 25,000 square foot covered arenas, not on the sides, but on the top, just like the Runner Farm.
But to me, 3 or 4 requests in 3 or 4 years, that's what
nothing.
the variance process is for.
Yeah,
Well,
that's
But he-
unusual, not
Right.
usual.
and even with 3 to 4, I still feel that it should come before them, because that is
Yeah.
a big,
And
big,
okay, so I'm
and
not
indicates
disagreeing.
to me, those people that wanted to come there, wanted it to be commercial.
And with the one example that we had, thank goodness that had to come before us, because that was 10 pounds of horse stuff on a 5-pound lot.
Which one was that?
The one that the guy wanted to build for the Olympian daughter
Right,
or
well, that went to
niece.
the BZA, you said. Okay, I was getting confused.
And,
Okay.
there were setback issues from the water on the property. He wasn't willing to recompense the trees that were going to have to
Right.
go
No,
out.
I mean, I agree. No.
So thank goodness that had to come before us.
Absolutely.
Now, so are we all set with the barn in the front yard?
Yes.
For both residential and commercial purposes, it doesn't matter?
Right.
As long
And there's
as-
no minimum or size of lot?
Well, and the commercial wouldn't matter because there's no other it could go, as long as they met the 100 foot, so that's not really
Well, it's got to be
a front yard.
1 acre or 3 acre, right?
As long as there's not a house on it, they can go anywhere. except for-
Yeah.
Is only
So
for
we need to make sure that's.
state.
Well, it's in 2,
Right, it's only barn or stable
yeah.
for the purpose
horses.
for horses.
Again, I don't
clear
want
on
to,
that? I mean-
drag us backwards, but at some point, somebody's going to have to explain to me, I appreciate Joe's language with the other than accessory being in there, but I'm still struggling with no matter what we say, because what you said before, Robin, was that today, if I came in if I wanted to put up a arena today, it would be allowed under A2.
So long as it doesn't exceed the 25,000 square foot or
Right,
whatever,
right,
yes.
which to me says that an arena today is a permitted use.
It's an allowed use, yes, permitted,
Well,
allowed, yeah.
Allowed is not a defined term. Is it a permitted use or is it an accessory use?
Well, I think that you can have a permitted use that's also an accessory use, so,
What if we,
So-
to solve your problem, what if we said uncovered riding area?
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm still struggling with what does it do for us to put in other than accessory? How does that change anything?
I think it doesn't change anything, I think it's just clarifying to make sure everybody understands that this tenant, this A4 is an issue to, when that's the only use on the property, there's no house or anything, it's just an equestrian use.
I mean, the owner might live somewhere else
Right.
or, on the lot next door, or
Right.
who knows?
So does that mean we have to go back to the language before that would say stables and barns for housing horses and uncovered riding areas
No, it's
other
not-
than accessory?
No,
Provided?
I'm just talking about the other than accessory. So I understand.
I know, but have we lost the other part that we wanted to?
No, because Robin's saying that right now, stables and barns and arenas are all in A2.
Yeah.
We consider that just a part of the use of agriculture. Just like, somebody can come in and you're right, they can
Okay.
put a chicken house up.
Well, okay.
And now, there are some distances requirements that aren't in the zoning, it's in a different section.
So let me go back and bring it back, a pretty painful one for us. If we don't necessarily go to 4 reading barns and stables, because if we're saying that this stuff can go in front, and it now then includes greenhouses, let's go back and revisit Freemanville and Red Road.
Well, we're not saying these things can go
No,
in the
these-
front.
these are not in
anymore.
front.
That
You
we're
have to-
talking
Oh,
about
these are
how the
just
next
That, yeah,
page.
if the whole property
This
is
is
nothing
defining
but
the
a
use.
greenhouse.
Okay, yeah, okay, I'm sorry. It goes back to,
But stay on that, because I'm not understanding that when your background says that presently, any new constructed barns cannot be placed in front of a primary residence. Is that what the text amendment presently says?
That's the I part.
That's the I part.
It could be
Okay,
on the side or the back.
right. That's I. So that means,
So
right
we-
now,
We've got to modify I to make sure it only applies to horses.
exactly, that's all I want to make sure.
Yeah, we could do that by
talked about
saying
that earlier.
I-1. Yeah, I-1, we said accessory building housing horses.
or we
Okay.
said barn or stable, housing horses.
Well, building, it's a building.
I have no problem.
Housing horses.
Yeah, but if you just say building, are we then opening up a door to a steel building versus a barn or a stable that is in keeping with the,
I mean, it could be, but it's got to be approved. The design has to be approved.
No, not for single, not for this, we don't look at the design of it for a residential property. We would for a, if it was just a commercial use. No, I mean, anybody could put
so maybe
any
more.
kind of barn that they want to, whether it's made out of steel or wood or brick or whatever, I don't know.
So let's go back, because
Yeah.
I may be the only one, I understand what Robin said, but for the sake of the equestrian community, I would rather keep some form of 4 in there where we're specifically talking about barns and stables and riding arenas or areas or rings or whatever, but because I personally, if I wanted to argue, I think I could argue very easily that that doesn't fall under 2. That may be the way we're applying to, but I personally don't see that, and I would rather that it be explicitly clear that we are allowing that as a permitted use.
Well, couldn't you just incorporate it into 2?
Absolutely.
And then just
Absolutely.
eliminate
I would
four.
just want to see the whole idea of.
Because that's the purpose of 2.
Right. Yeah, it's a good point. I agree with you. I just don't want to assume that it's in the language that's there. But now, back to the other point. So with this other than accessory, that's saying, I think, Robin, what you're trying to say is that if it were deemed an accessory use, then the 100 feet and the 10 acres wouldn't apply.
The 100 feet still does when we talk about it, but, in I, but
But not the 10 acres.
but not the 10 acres.
Right. So the 10 acres would go away if it's not an accessory use.
Right.
Instead, it would fall under E, 1 acre or 3 acres.
Right. Okay. All right.
Well, you had me until you took out the 10-acre part.
Well, the 10
Well,
acre,
we're not taking
if,
it out.
if it's not an accessory use, if it's not an accessory use, then the 10 acres applies. If it's deemed an accessory use, then it comes under B and then.
Which is 1 or 3 acres.
Right.
Okay, so then can we go back to what I was saying? Maybe you could strike the part about other than accessory.
No, that needs to stay now.
I was that close.
Yeah, no, I think you've got to leave that other than it.
Yeah, it needs to stay.
Okay, so you go back
Well,
to saying.
because of the way you read it.
Although I'm
You said
not
that's-
necessarily thinking that we should incorporate it in 2. I like the idea of being further definitive with 4.
Yeah, I would rather keep it separate.
And it goes back to saying stables and barns for housing horses and uncovered riding areas other than accessory, provided, semicolon, provided is at least 100 feet from all property lines and the lot is not less than 10 acres.
Provided buildings.
Provided, yes, well, buildings and the ring, right? And the area.
Well, if you call it an area, it's going to be, yeah, I would say providing buildings and the riding area are at least, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so then we've got it.
That works for me.
Well, we still have to say, I don't want to, we still have to use the terminology that's here buildings used for horses
Right.
Yeah,
as opposed to running
Yeah, he
stables
said
or
that.
barns.
Yeah, I said that.
Okay.
I said stables and barns for housing horses.
Well, no, don't, that's my point. Don't use stables or barns. It's buildings.
Well, but I'm not thrilled with the buildings part later. I wanna-
No, but we're going to carry buildings for horses later.
Yeah, because then we
Is-
say in I-1, accessory building housing horses are allowed.
Right, but that's where I take the issue again, is I don't want it to necessarily be a steel building that is, just see advertised on late night TV is suddenly okay
But
to be,
barn, you know,
to
to
be in
Ron's
front,
point-
well, let me finish, to be in front of it, when that is not in keeping with the rural equestrian, lifestyle and appearance that we have today. If we aren't reviewing that, I think that's an oversight that we probably need to catch up on. So I understand where you're going, Joe, where you want, the building would be consistent and easily managed, but I'd like to make sure that we're a little bit more definitive about that.
But
Calling
that's
it a
not
barn doesn't do that.
Yeah, it's not a defined term. You've got to go then back and say, okay, what's the definition of a barn or a riding stable?
We could
Or
say-
what are the architectural limitations
Yeah,
on
that's a
that,
design
which we don't have
guideline, not
anywhere
a
right now.
use.
Right. Well, we'd have
So
to-
they could build a
Doesn't mean we
Will's
think
Park.
we shouldn't go there.
No, I agree,
They could build a Will's Park
yeah.
arena.
Well, I mean.
Well, not
or-
if it
or-
exceeded
Well,
25,000.
no, I'm saying structurally.
Yeah, but I mean, to Paul's concern, they could also build a barn out of steel. I mean, you wouldn't
Yeah.
be able to afford that, but technically, they could do that without having anything to prevent
Which
it.
is really Will's Park, the big arena.
No, but I mean, even size, they could build a 200-square-foot barn out of steel.
Of steel,
and,
right.
stucco
Same-
and
same thing,
pink-
only small.
pink stucco or
Right.
whatever. you know.
I agree.
Could you say something like an approved structure? That way, at least they know that they could put something out there, but they would have to come to get the design approved?
We don't have anything in
don't have
the
design
ordinance, we don't
guidelines?
have anything in the ordinance right now that controls the aesthetics of that design.
We're saying it doesn't mean we couldn't or shouldn't go there at some point. That's tackling another pretty big task.
Huge.
Yeah.
But I agree, desirable. So let's try this one more time for the language and for, if we, recognizing that we don't have any way to control the design of the building,
Okay.
if we said buildings
For housing horses.
for housing horses,
And uncovered riding areas.
and uncovered riding, I'm having trouble with where to put other than accessory. Uncovered riding areas other than accessory?
Yeah.
Okay.
Semicolon.
Provided the buildings are at least,
Buildings and riding area
Right.
are.
At least 100 feet from all
100
property
feet from all property lines and not less than 10 acres.
that work.
I think that works. I'm not wild about the buildings part, but
I agree with
everybody,
you.
to Joe's point, we can't go there today.
Right, but I agree. As long as nobody else can build anything else but horse barn.
And we'd have to change the word riding arenas to riding areas in I-2.
Yeah.
But we've got to change, you're talking about, you're over high now, Joe?
Yeah.
I think we've got to change housing animals to housing horses, right?
Yeah.
Right, in I-1.
Right. And then in I-2 change, right, riding arenas to riding areas. Just so everybody's on the same page, again, definitional here. Minimum yard is a defined term. One of the problems with our code, for Gariel and Mark's benefit, one of the things that's frustrating is that you don't know which one of these terms are defined because they're not capitalized, and so you have to go back and look in the definition section. Minimum yard is a defined term, and it means the minimum distance between a building or structure and a lot line as specified in the regulations. So that would say, help, again, interpretation, Robin, if we look at one, it says that an accessory building housing horses would be allowed in the front, side, or rear yards, but not in a minimum yard. What does that mean?
That means that the minimum yard typically where we're talking about is AG1. So if you look at, go to section 64-416 on page 1 on the bottom. Minimum front yard is 60. Minimum side yard is typically 25, but if it's adjacent to the street, it's 40. And the minimum rear yard is 50 on the rear. So you
Yeah.
cannot put the
So
buildings.
it's got to be
You can't do-
61 foot
Has to be
front yard.
61 feet, has to be 51 feet,
Yeah.
it's gotta be, so,
That's what I was.
yeah. So
Okay.
that's what a minimum yards mean.
Okay, what I apologize, you know I do this all the time, but when I look at that, and we say that, and then we say, provided the building is a minimum of 100 feet from all property lines, if it's 100 feet from all property lines, how can it be in the minimum yard? When all the definitions of minimum yard are less than 100?
Well, that's how it was originally, you know, I mean, we can take out the minimum yards, that's fine.
I'm not trying to, I'm just, to me,
I know,
it adds a
it's-
complication. If it's 100 feet from all the property
gonna be
lines,
more
unless there's some district where
You're
the
right.
minimum yard is
And there
greater
is
than
a
that.
district that's large, yes. So,
I just think
mean,
it's-
in a way, you don't,
Yeah.
I mean, you could take out, but not in a minimum yard, because you're right, it doesn't apply in AG1.
Yeah, so just say,
take out.
provided the building's a minimum of 100 feet from all property line.
Right.
And that's both 1 and 2.
Right.
So we're striking,
We just take the words, but not in a minimum yard in both cases, because it doesn't add
yeah,
anything.
I agree.
Okay. Now I'll shut up. So, now we need to talk about J.
Well, let's see.
Well,
Okay.
My only question on J is is public street a defined term?
Either public, I mean,
Public right-of-way could be.
it's public, I mean, it's not private versus a privately held by HOA, but let me see.
So, as an example, the gated section of White Columns is all private streets, they're not
Correct.
public. So, if somebody wanted to put up a sky blue pink fence that made out of wrought iron or whatever, they could do that. This would not preclude that.
The
city.
Our covenants may, our
Exactly.
covenants may, but the
The city
ordinance
would
would
care,
not.
yeah.
right?
Along.
It wouldn't apply.
Along Freemanville, that you're talking about.
No, I'm talking about within the community.
Within the community, and we don't really care what you do, to
Exactly.
be honest.
Right, but,
That's
yeah,
why,
well, that's why.
but I mean, there could technically be a side lot that has frontage.
Yeah.
That's a
the
right of
street.
way there.
That's a
though.
public,
Yeah.
that's why I
Right.
said public, and we more care about, we don't really have any main thoroughfares that are private, so.
And
okay, so that resolves my question.
Yeah.
we talked
I just
about
wanna
it
make
before,
sure
but
we're
what was the definition that we could, opaque, okay?
Yeah.
To your point.
Right.
What are we saying the definition of opaque is,
Can't see through it.
You can't see through it.
It could be a stone wall.
okay?
It could be
could be
a
Right.
upright one
Okay.
by six
As long as,
board fence, like the guy over on Taylor Road that.
Yeah,
that-
yeah.
That agricultural.
But it has to be a 1x6 board fence that has no knot holes in it. It's no longer
Big
opaque.
Right.
okay. No problem, I just,
Okay, I'm okay with J the way it is.
I was, yeah.
Was the fencing, is it creosote, or can they paint it?
That's not a requirement either
Yeah, they can
way.
be white.
They can
I
be
mean,
white or-
Typically, they're either white or black, and most.
But again, that's one of those things that.
Design, okay.
Design.
Yeah,
Okay.
It says-
That's why I use
I don't know what we're giving
purple,
that
sky blue pink,
sky
yeah.
blue pink, yeah, right.
I don't know, we can ask. Can we go back a minute to I2?
Sure.
Accessory, is this the way you want it, or did we miss, I missed something? Accessory covered or uncovered riding areas are allowed in the front, side, or rear yards?
Covered or has to come out.
Yeah, covered or it comes out.
Accessory uncovered riding areas.
Okay.
Are allowed in
Areas or
front si-
areas?
No,
Areas.
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 Okay, that's
Are
what I
allowed in
said.
the front
Okay.
side or rear yards, provided the the building is, or area is 100 feet from all property lines.
So accessory uncovered riding areas
Are allowed in the
are allowed
front,
in the
side,
front,
or
side,
rear yards, provided the building or riding area is 100 feet. And we probably ought to say at least 100 feet, or a minimum of, not that it is 100 feet.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You wouldn't say building in two, would you? Provided the building, you're not referring to any building there.
No,
It's
the
the
area.
riding.
That's a good point.
Provided
You're
the
right.
riding area.
You're right. Yeah, we took building out by taking
Right.
covered, yeah.
It's at least 100 feet from all property lines.
Right.
Okay. So
But
they were okay with the
but
pasture.
add minimum.
Okay. At least.
Yeah, she
Same
did
as
at
what
least
we had in one.
minimum.
Well, they use minimum in one.
Gotcha.
Okay, so I want to just, I just want to make sure I understand. It's okay to have a pasture with a, you know, it's fenced off pasture.
Yeah, provided it complies with the fencing requirement.
Well, see, that's the other thing, y'all, we don't require any fence permits for AG1 uses. They can just put up their 4-board fence. Now, if they put up something wrong, we can tell them you got it wrong, but they don't need a fence permit when it's for agricultural uses.
But that's my point. I mean, to have to put up a 3 or 4 board fence if it's along public street.
Right, but even interior, right. They could put a purple, blue, and white fence if they wanted to interior.
Yep.
Right.
Right.
Well,
Is
as long as it's
your,
4-board,
is your point that technically they don't have to put up a fence at all?
or what?
A riding pasture?
Well, I would hope they would put at least on the periphery, but don't, sometimes they have subsets of riding
Sure.
areas.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying that that's the kind of thing is, you know, what if they start going round and round and round, the horses, and then they kind of create this path that looks like a ring?
That's okay.
It's okay.
Which is probably what they'll do.
Now you're getting to sound like us.
Well,
Robin,
she's trying to come, yeah,
she's reversing this.
full circle back to get what she
Sure
wanted.
is.
Okay.
Can we ask can we ask her if does this
Absolutely.
sound
Yeah.
like what you were looking for?
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I know this was painful, but I think you really thought through all the problems that might come up because, you know, without going backwards, I think you went forwards, and that's how you got going.
We went in circles.
Yeah, but that was, I know it's painful, and we really appreciate it, because I think you got to what my intention was.
Okay.
And, you know, Robin, I'd be happy to work with you on
Yeah.
the commercial and on, you know, how we can do things to make their lives easier when they come, because, I mean, you know, we want to attract them too. And the covered arenas are tricky. They're big structures, so, and a lot of these parcels are, you know, do come up against residences that would probably, you know, need to be considered, so.
Right. Well, definitely is an issue.
Thank you,
Dealing with.
Mark.
So, Robin, let me, at the risk of, before we have a motion, let me try and read what I think we said for these changes, and just to make sure you've got them, and then we can worry about a motion.
Right.
I think what we said for 4 is that it would read buildings for housing horses and riding areas other than accessory.
Uncovered.
Can I just, I think you got a floating phrase in there that's unrelated. I think you need to put other than accessory next to buildings. Because otherwise it's going to relate to uncovered riding arenas.
But I
that's just my
think that was
suggestion.
our intent, wasn't it?
Well, don't you want to include other than accessory for housing horses and the uncovered riding, the barns and the arenas?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
The other than accessory relates to the building, so I
Well,
would
then
put
why don't
that
we-
phrase after
well, then-
buildings.
Okay.
Buildings other than accessory for housing horses and uncovered riding areas. Because otherwise what's the phrase, you know, I don't want to say it's a floating participle, but it's.
No, I know what
floating
you're
out there.
saying.
Well,
Well, but
Just to
I think
clarify.
it
But if you
still
say- if you
applies
say
to both
buildings
the
and-
riding areas and the buildings?
If you say buildings and riding areas, comma, other than accessory,
Right.
you're including the two
Including
things.
both, right.
Okay, well, you're the lawyers, as long as you think that comma will include both
Yeah, 'cause you're
uses,
using the-
not the one closest to it.
No. You're using the and then comma, then you're including both.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so let's start again, so. I
So
make sure I-
buildings for housing horses and riding areas,
And
comma,
Uncovered.
uncovered riding areas, comma, other than accessory, semicolon. Provided buildings and uncovered riding areas are at least 100 feet from all property lines and the lot is not less than 10 acres.
Do it one more time for me, please.
Okay? Buildings for housing horses and uncovered riding areas, comma, other than accessory, semicolon. Provided riding areas.
Provided the buildings.
Okay, providing buildings and riding areas are at least.
Provided the buildings and riding areas?
I don't need the.
Yeah, you don't need that.
Okay.
Just provided buildings and riding areas are at least 100 feet from all property lines and the lot is less than 10, not less than
Did you
10
mean
acres.
uncovered riding areas, or did we get rid of that?
We don't need to say it twice.
Okay.
We can if you want.
Yeah. I would say put it back in just to make sure it's really clear.
Okay. And then
I
for.
think we nailed that one.
And then for I-1, we want to say accessory buildings housing horses are allowed in the front, side, or rear yards, provided the building, or buildings, I guess we should say, buildings are a minimum of 100 feet from all property lines and a minimum of 150 feet from any occupied building except the dwelling unit of the owner. And then 2,
So are you making it plural, buildings?
yeah, I think so, because it said plural in the first.
Yeah.
And then 2 is accessory uncovered riding areas are allowed in the front, side, or rear yards, provided the riding areas are at least 100 feet from all property line.
Areas are.
That works.
And you, going back to 1, you said accessory buildings. You didn't
Yes.
say just buildings.
Right.
Accessory buildings for housing horses are allowed in the front, side, or rear yards,
Right,
provided the buildings are, the rest stays the same.
right.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
So, you got it?
Yep.
Okay. Any more discussion? We need a motion to approve.
Piece of horse.
I'd like to make a motion, we approve RZ 12-01 text amendment to Article 6, Division 2, AG 1 agricultural, to include the following changes. Under A, permitted uses, .4, it will read, buildings for housing horses in uncovered riding areas, comma, other than accessory, semicolon, provided buildings and uncovered riding areas are at least 100 feet from all property lines and the lot is not less than 10 acres. To include changing point.
We're adding subsections 1 and 2.
Yeah, okay, adding subsections 1 and 2 under I to read, accessory buildings for housing horses are allowed in the front, side, or rear yards, provided the buildings are a minimum of 100 feet from all property lines and a minimum of 150 feet from any occupied building except the dwelling unit of the owner. And 2, to read, accessory uncovered riding areas are allowed in the front, side, or rear yards, provided the riding areas are at least a minimum of 100 feet from all property lines. And that is my motion.
Jay.
Second.
Oh, Jay.
Oh,
The fencing.
J is all new text.
Oh, okay, and to include J, reading fencing material and height along public streets. So point 1, allowed fencing material should be 3 or 4 board wooden fencing with wood posts. 2, fences shall not exceed 55 inches from finished grade. 3, opaque fences are prohibited. And 4, fences shall be set back a minimum of 3 feet from a public right-of-way. That's what-
Second it.
Gary will second it. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Super. They're not all that tough, guys, just so you
Don't believe that.
Well, that was an important one.
I can see that George will make them that tough.
Thanks a lot. Okay. Robin,
Okay, I have an update on the matrix. I do not have a finished
Laura.
matrix for you. Thank you.
Thanks for
very
coming,
much,
Laura.
I called around, I don't have a matrix, a proposed matrix is what was my goal, but did some calling around. First of all, the city solicitor had suggested to call around to other jurisdictions to figure out what other people have done for their penalties, amounts. And so other than Forsyth County that obviously we know about, there's nobody else. Not in Roswell, I talked to the court. City of Fayetteville, they have, everybody knows about the $1,000 per day per occurrence, and in Fayetteville, they do the first time 25%, and then second time 50%, and third time 100%, just overall. There's no differences in the different violations. And then Suwannee doesn't have anything like that. Woodstock has a $100 flat fine. Cherokee has nothing. Cherokee County, Cobb County, they just have something for signs, and I'm waiting to hear about what that is. And so that's what I have. So my goal was to kind of compare, because that's what the city solicitor had asked us to do, but there's really not much to compare to.
can you summarize what you just read to us? I mean, in an email
Yeah,
or something?
I can send it to you.
I think for the sake of Gary and Mark, we
Right.
probably ought to put it on the agenda for the next meeting and
Okay.
kind of bring them up to speed with kind of how we got here, tell them what
Okay.
the purpose was, and share with them the matrix that we
Okay.
looked at before.
That's fine. We
Okay.
can do that. So anyway, that's where we are. So I think what we're going to do now is just go ahead and try to put together some fees, mainly based on the Forsyth thing, although they're not real heavy on zoning and all that. So we're
Right.
just a little bit kind of not shooting in the dark, but experimenting. So we'll see. So that's the goal. So I can just abbreviate what we're trying to do is, for our new commissioners, anytime that there's code violations, whether it's what we call property maintenance code, like people have high grass, or they don't have maintaining their home, whatever, as well as the zoning rules, it's in the zoning ordinance, and then we have just other code enforcement. Nuisances. And so what's happened is that, you know, we haven't been able to get some tough penalties for these occurrences of the violations when they go to court. And we found out from the city solicitor, who makes recommendations to the judge, that she's really not familiar with, you know, even dealing with assigning the fines for these. So the city attorney also works for Forsyth, and he had suggested that Forsyth had a matrix of different 3 times if there's first offense, second offense, third offense, and they have a suggestion of each time, of each offense, of how much to fine each type of violation. So that's what we're trying to do right now, is to come up with a matrix, and I can send you the background. There's a purpose for it, as well as send you the Forsyth County one. So that's what our goal is, to come up with our own matrix. So, anyway, so we'll bring that back.
Okay.
I do have, I thought we would remind them or tell them about the joint work session? Do you want to talk about the LCI, where the status is on the LCI study and the need for that joint work session on March 12th? That, just so they can plan.
Which one is that? That's
The LCI, the Highway 9.
The Highway 9?
The joint.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
We've sort of scheduled all the meetings as we move forward, the idea being to be done with the planning study we're doing for the Deerfield Route 9 area, and that's being done by Urban Collage, as you know. And essentially, we will be bringing for a public work session, a joint public work session to the council and to the planning commission. We've got that planned for May 12th.
March.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I knew it was an M, sorry,
M.
March 12th.
Yeah.
So if you can put that down on your calendars, we'd like very much to have you there so we can do the joint presentation at that time.
There is a meeting, what, Thursday? on
Yes, there's
that?
a public public meeting Thursday night here. I think it's at 6 o'clock that it starts. So you're certainly all welcome to attend that.
March 12th 's a Monday.
Here we are, that's far.
So that's just the
And I
city
think that
council
it'll
work
be on
sessions
your
normally.
agenda just for the planning commission, I believe in February, right? Don't they hear it just by themselves before the joint work session? I think that's what I saw. Or am I mistaken about that?
I don't know. I'd
I'll
have to go back.
confirm, I'll check with Michelle, but I think you guys will have an opportunity to look at it on your own, at your own meeting, but I'll let you know.
Yeah.
But for some reason, that sticks in my head. So we have that.
And then, of course, we continue to meet on Crabapple. George was at our last meeting. I think it was last week, wasn't it?
Right.
Yes.
We talked about transfer of development rights, and that is, for those of you who are interested in that concept, we did have the national expert, truly, on transfer of development rights. He got a little into the weeds on it, but he certainly gave us the overview.
That's an understatement.
Of transfer of development rights. And it is on, we filmed it on Granicus, and we've also put the actual PowerPoint presentation on the website too. So you can literally print out the PowerPoint so you can read along as he's talking, because it's hard to see the PowerPoint screen on Granicus because it's just on one of these screens here. But if you have the PowerPoint in front of you, you can literally follow along. But it's a 50-minute presentation. And we introduce the topic. As we move forward now, our form-based code will be the overlay zone. They're working on that now. And we're all going to come back on February 29th to start reviewing the form-based code and then how to overlay the transfer of development rights on top of that. So as we start to look at something, I think the concepts of form-based code and the transfer of development rights, when we've got something in front of us, it will start to relate and the questions will come out. And sort of a case study method, I guess, is, I think, a better way of learning than being lectured at. And we had the lecture the other night, but in the future it will be a case study because we'll actually have a proposed plan in front of us and then we'll have to see how this transfer of development rights concept is going to fit on that. So that's all to come. And we expect to start discussing this at the next meeting on February 29th.
And for Fred's benefit, I believe it was last week's work session that they brought up the pill mill or the.
Right.
Yeah.
That was my first question.
Yes.
What
Yes.
Ken was supposed to be looking into it. What did they just
Well,
discuss?
basically,
Are they gonna
what
put
we're
a-
probably going to extend the moratorium to allow us to, Dave, from what I understand you were saying,
Yeah.
to look into an ordinance. I
Good.
told Kathy that we'd already started that process.
Yes. And then the other thing they're going to do is also, they're extending the moratorium, but there was legislation that was passed.
Yes.
But it wasn't, they established a body to review and take in every time a prescription was written that they're supposed to send into this database. But the group that's supposed to be overseeing this database per the legislation was never funded.
Right.
So they're going to look to see if it's funded this year in the governor's budget. And if it's funded, then maybe that's the route that we can go. But in the meantime, they've
Just
asked
help
staff
keep
to
them-
start looking at an ordinance so that if it's not funded, we have to go on our own.
Okay.
Okay?
Right.
Okay.
So-
There are two
Right.
that have been set up. I think it's Cobb County or City of Marietta has one.
And I have to go back and look at my notes. There's someone else that's already set up a
Oh,
ordinance.
Oh, well,
So
if
it won't
you
be
could
like
get-
starting,
I know we have one of them, it's on
Yeah.
Lynn's Drive, so yeah.
right. We had started that.
Yeah,
good.
so we're already a little ahead, a little bit.
Couple things. You were asking about the LCI. The LCI is supposed to come before us on the 27th at our regular
Of
meeting.
March, yeah.
Yeah,
Of
but at a
February.
regular meeting. It's not a separate meeting. It is March. March 27th.
Oh, it's afterwards, that's
So-
right.
So
It's
I think the
afterwards.
idea was to have
And
one
work
big
together. I just knew
presentation.
it was by
Yeah.
yourself.
The work
somewhere.
session's on the 12th, and then it comes to us on the 27th.
Okay, yeah.
It's supposed to come to us on the 27th with a recommendation to forward it to council for the April meeting.
Right.
So if you can't make the March 12th session, we need to try and get people to catch up with that recommendation somehow, because you won't want to see it for the first time on the 27th.
Yeah, well, it will be filmed, so you can go on the website and pick it up if you can't make the 12th, so.
Robin, can you send, and whether it's updated or not, doesn't matter, could you send out the 11 by 17?
I have copies right
So
now.
that Gary and Mark have a copy?
So the March 12th meeting is
It's a work
that's an
session
LCI work session.
of the
with
city council, which.
And it'll be
you're
here
gonna be
at
joining.
6?
Yes, that is correct.
I'm going to take one and put this down.
We have a couple more things.
Go ahead, Brent. Sure. Go ahead.
Kathy, on my other hot button,
Yep, I have my pen.
the sign, the Gold Store, our only one, is still just plastered with signs over there on 9.
Well, I apologize because
Well, that's
I did
okay.
have that conversation the day after we last talked about it, and I don't know what happened.
But to add to it now, about every other day, they have a gentleman sitting in a chair out on the right-of-way holding up a sign. Buying gold.
The sign ordinance hasn't been passed yet.
Yeah.
No, but this goes back. This is okay. This is in the old, it would,
No, I'm saying the guy standing there holding the sign is okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Until the sign
until
ordinance
the
Yeah,
new one is
yeah,
passed.
yeah.
But the other one's, the one that's the worst is the windows. I mean, it's just solid.
Yeah, well, you know what, I'm going to have the code enforcement officer respond to you tomorrow.
Well, that's how, no, these are my hot points.
Yeah, but no, I mean, you know,
And we've got a conversation, Robin, you and I have had this on Windward. That fellow that stands out there and holds up the teriyaki sign every day at noon. Now, is the right-of-way in Alpharetta?
Yes, that area is.
Okay, so that's Alpharetta, so I
But,
gotta
they're
call
fine
Bill.
with us enforcing stuff out of.
They are?
Alpharetta.
Well-
Yeah, that's not a problem.
Because if not, I can call my friend Bill.
no, we talked
Or-
about that at our staff meeting
Get off
today,
the street.
that, you know, what we can do is get them out of the right-of-way.
Right.
And, but do you know what they told me today at the staff meeting is that there is now this, almost like an underground expertise that's come through where they have contests now for these guys in terms of how they troll their signs.
Sure. Oh, the
And
guy
make
was-
up to $70,000 a year.
This is becoming quite a profession.
The fellow that we finally got off the corner at Windward and 9, he'd
solve that
been
very
right up
quickly.
there with us.
Yeah, I couldn't believe this, but.
We can give the Cherokee County boys an advantage because they won't have to compete with those in Milton.
That's right. For sure.
That wasn't what I meant.
That's all I said.
Kind of
All right,
running off the
teriyaki
road at the
sign.
wrong
Oh,
time.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I know we've been, all right.
And as Bill Blood said, they tried to do it on the weekend when none of us work.
Right,
Yeah.
lots of things happen.
One piece of information to share, well, to not only to share, but to solicit. We've had 2 meetings so far of the Charter Commission. And what we've decided to do as a starting point was we've elected to address the questions, I'll put them in that context, that were raised by the City Council as things that they would like the Commission to consider and look at. I would be more than happy to share that list with you guys, but what I'm more interested in is if there's anything else that you guys feel like should be considered, we want to make sure that's on the table. And what we're trying to do right now is to gather whatever other questions or potential changes people think we ought to address, to consider those as part of that. Right now, the only formal list we've got is the list we got from City Council. So we're kind of adding to that.
Take a long time to share the two items that they're asking you to look at in particular, or tonight?
No. Did I say
You
two
said
items?
there were two questions that they've already posed to you guys to consider.
No. There's a list of questions. Sorry.
Oh.
Yeah, there's a list of questions. We've tried to prioritize those, to your point. We've tried to prioritize them. The last meeting, we talked about not changing the millage rate, but changing the way the millage rate could be changed and whether we should think about doing that. Right now, the belief is that the way that the current language is written into the charter is it hampers our ability to get the millage rate changed, which in turn hampers our ability to get financing.
Well, it accomplished the task of becoming a city at the time.
Yeah.
Writing it the way that it was written.
Yeah, well, yes, good point. Although, in all fairness, I think the only commitment, and this is me personally, I think the commitment that was made at the time that we incorporated was that we would not change the millage rate unless the voters approved that. What's being discussed is not changing that premise at all, but instead of saying right now the charter says that you have to have a majority of the voters to approve a change in the millage rate, not